Dr. Lyra Tolson was a name known across the United Earth Federation for her groundbreaking work in xenobiology. Her passion for studying alien life was unmatched, and her current assignment aboard the Horizon was the pinnacle of her career. The Horizon was a massive exploration ship stationed near the outer rim of the human-colonized systems, a place where few had dared to venture. The ship's sleek exterior glinted against the backdrop of distant stars, and inside, Lyra worked tirelessly alongside a team of scientists, hoping to discover new species and build alliances that would solidify humanity's position in the galaxy. Despite humanity's many discoveries, the Federation's influence in the galactic community was under threat. Tensions with other alien species had risen over the years, and some factions had begun to question humanity's intentions. Many viewed humans as aggressive expansionists, eager to conquer and dominate, rather than peaceful explorers. Lyra knew that the Federation needed allies, but finding them wasn't easy. She had spent years studying various alien races, searching for the key to building a lasting alliance. However, there was one species that had eluded her and all of humanity for generations: the Xener. The Xener were an ancient and mysterious race, with technology and knowledge that far surpassed anything humanity had ever discovered. Their culture was shrouded in secrecy, and despite humanity's best efforts, they had never made contact. For years, the Federation had speculated about the Xener's whereabouts, but they had always remained a ghost in the galaxy, their true intentions and capabilities unknown. Lyra's mission aboard the Horizon was to study any potential signs of the Xener, hoping to unlock the secrets of their advanced technology and secure an alliance that could change the fate of humanity. One day, while conducting a deep space scan of a distant nebula, Lyra detected an anomaly: an abandoned station. The signal it sent was weak, almost as if it had been dormant for centuries. The readings suggested that the station had once belonged to the Xener, but it was unlike anything Lyra had ever seen before. Intrigued by the discovery, she initiated a full scan of the area, uncovering the station's location and making the decision to investigate further. The Horizon crew, under Lyra's guidance, set course for the station. It was a risky endeavor, as the station had been out of contact for so long, and there was no telling what dangers might await them. As the ship approached the station, the crew braced themselves for whatever they might find. The station, which appeared to be a sprawling complex of metal and strange crystalline structures, was eerily silent. No signs of life, no communication, nothing but the endless void of space surrounding it. Lyra felt a surge of excitement as they docked with the station. She had spent years studying alien ruins, but nothing compared to the thrill of discovering something this significant. With her heart pounding in her chest, she led a small team of explorers into the station's darkened halls, their footsteps echoing in the quiet. As they ventured deeper into the abandoned structure, they uncovered evidence of a once thriving civilization: artifacts, ancient technology, and strange symbols etched into the walls. But amidst the ruins, one discovery stood out among the rest. Hidden within a sealed chamber, Lyra found a cryogenic pod. It was unlike any pod she had seen before. Its design was sleek and otherworldly. But what truly took her breath away was the occupant inside, a human child, frozen in cryostasis. The child's small, delicate features were visible through the transparent casing, and Lyra could feel an overwhelming sense of wonder and unease wash over her. At first, she hesitated. The child's presence on a Xener station didn't make sense. How could a human child be here? What was their connection to the Xener? And why had they been preserved for so long? Lyra knew that the discovery was monumental. She also knew that it was dangerous to tamper with such an unknown entity, but the temptation to bring the child back to the Horizon was too strong. If the child had somehow survived all these years, they could hold the answers to the Xener's mysterious disappearance and, possibly, the key to unlocking their technology. Against the advice of her crew, Lyra made the decision to bring the child aboard the Horizon. As she gently thawed the child from cryostasis, the ship's systems began to flicker and malfunction. Lights dimmed, alarms blared, and something far worse began to unfold. The moment the child's eyes opened, a strange energy pulsed throughout the ship. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine as the Horizon's communication system suddenly came alive, broadcasting an alien signal to every corner of the galaxy. It wasn't just any signal, it was a call. A call that would stir dormant warships across countless star systems, including Earth's. The child, once thought to be a lost relic, was something far more dangerous. They were a trigger, a signal. And now, the galaxy knew of their existence. Lyra's heart sank as she realized the gravity of her actions. What she had thought was an innocent discovery was now a ticking time bomb, one that could bring war to the very doorstep of humanity. As warships began to awaken across the galaxy, Lyra's mission had taken a sharp turn from exploration to survival. And she couldn't help but wonder, had humanity stumbled upon something they were never meant to find? Lyra had always believed that discoveries were a path to understanding. But now, as the first signs of danger began to unfold across the galaxy, her belief was starting to unravel. The child, who had seemed like nothing more than a mystery from the distant past, was quickly becoming the key to a much darker fate. The signal she had unwittingly triggered when bringing the child aboard the Horizon was not a random event. It was a call to arms, a warning to the galaxy's most powerful species that humanity had awakened something far more dangerous than they had realized. Within hours of the child's awakening, the first warships appeared in the skies of various worlds, including Earth. These were not just any fleets, but heavily armed and prepared for battle. They came from a coalition of alien species, long united in their hatred and fear of the Xener. These species had long ago identified the child as a crucial piece of an ancient prophecy, one that forewarned the downfall of their civilization, a downfall that had been set in motion by the Xener's ancient technology and their tragic fall from power. The child, the last surviving heir to that ruined empire, was considered the final piece needed to destroy the last vestiges of the Xener's power. And now, humanity was caught in the middle of a war they hadn't even known was brewing. The revelation that the child was the key to an ancient prophecy sent shockwaves through the horizon. What had initially seemed like an innocent discovery was now a deadly game of galactic politics. The child was no longer just an enigma to be studied, this child was a weapon. And as Lyra watched the alien warships draw closer, she realized that her actions had set in motion a chain of events beyond her control. The child had awoken forces that were determined to ensure humanity would never uncover the secrets of the Xener, let alone use them for themselves. But the Federation's response was swift, and not everyone in the Federation's upper echelons was concerned with protecting the child. Lyra found herself facing mounting pressure from Earth's leadership, who had begun to see the child not as a victim, but as a valuable asset. The Federation's high command saw the child as a bargaining chip, a way to negotiate with the alien coalitions, or even more dangerously, as a means of controlling the warships and their formidable power. Earth's politicians, eager to assert humanity's dominance, began discussing the possibility of using the child as a weapon against the very same factions that sought to destroy them. Lyra was horrified. She had brought the child aboard with the hope of learning something profound, something that could elevate humanity's understanding of the universe. Instead, she had triggered a war, and now the child was being used as a tool in a political game. She had always believed in the Federation's mission to protect humanity and establish peaceful relations with other species, but now the lines between right and wrong were blurring. Could she, in good conscience, follow orders that would use the child as a pawn in a galactic war? Or should she defy the Federation's leadership and protect the child from the very people she had once sworn to serve? The child, for their part, was not simply a helpless victim caught in the crossfire. As the days passed, the child's abilities began to surface, abilities that were both remarkable and frightening. Through a form of telepathic communication, the child began to make contact with certain alien species. It was as though they had access to the minds of beings who had long since hidden their true intentions. The messages were cryptic, and their meaning was not immediately clear, but it was undeniable. The child was a link to something far greater and more ancient than anyone had imagined. Lyra's uncertainty only grew as she spent more time with the child. She began to understand that the child was not just the last heir to the Xener's fallen empire, they were something else, something entirely unexpected. The child had been born into a world of conflict and prophecy, and now they were awakening to a reality that humanity had no understanding of. They were not simply a weapon or a victim, they were an integral part of the galaxy's larger struggle. And yet, as Lyra looked into the child's eyes, she saw only fear and confusion. They had been preserved for centuries, but they had never asked for this responsibility. Now, with war on the horizon, Lyra had no idea how to protect them from the political and military forces closing in.asa. The Federation's leadership pushed forward with their plans to use the child. Lyra's relationship with her crew began to fracture. Commander Holt, a battle-hardened military officer, was the first to voice his concerns openly. He was not as sympathetic to the child's plight as Lyra was. He saw the child as a dangerous force, one that could not be allowed to live, as their existence threatened humanity's very survival. Holt began to argue that the child should be executed before they could bring about the destruction the Federation feared. To Holt, the child's survival was a betrayal. He saw the Federation's mission as clear: protect humanity at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing the child. In stark contrast, Dr. Osrin, the ship's chief engineer, became Lyra's unlikely ally. Osrin, a quiet and contemplative scientist, believed that there was more to the child's abilities than anyone realized. He had spent countless hours researching the child's origins, and through his studies, he began to uncover hidden clues about the Zener and their tragic fall from grace. Osrin was convinced that the child was not a mere weapon, but a key to understanding the true nature of the Zener's downfall, and perhaps even a way to prevent future conflict. Lyra, torn between her growing doubts and her loyalty to the Federation, began to see the bigger picture. Humanity's history with the Zener wasn't one of innocent exploration and curiosity, it was one of destruction. As Osrin's research revealed, humanity had played a significant role in the downfall of the Zener, contributing to the catastrophic war that nearly wiped them out. The child, now the last surviving heir to the Zener's once great empire, was a living reminder of that dark past. And with the warships closing in, Lyra began to question if humanity was really the innocent party in this conflict, or if they had, once again, become the aggressors. Amidst these growing tensions, a new mystery emerged. Lyra received a cryptic message from the child, written in an ancient language that no one aboard the Horizon could decipher. The message was filled with strange symbols and patterns, and no one could make sense of it except for a forgotten archive hidden deep within the Federation's most classified databases. The archive contained a long-lost history of the Zener, including details of their downfall. The more Lyra delved into the archive, the more she began to wonder if humanity had been entangled in the Zener's fate all along. The message hinted at the true significance of the child. They were not just a link to the Zener's past, but a force that could reshape the future. But Lyra wasn't sure what that future would look like. Would humanity be able to use the child's power to their advantage, or would they be destroyed by the forces they had awakened? As Lyra faced mounting political pressure and moral dilemmas, one thing was certain: the child was no longer just a mystery. They were the fulcrum on which the fate of the galaxy would be balanced, and Lyra didn't know whether to protect them or let the galaxy tear them apart. The Horizon drifted silently in the vast expanse of space, suspended between two realities. One was a galaxy on the brink of war, teetering on the edge of annihilation. The other was a fragile truth that Lyra Tolson had only just begun to understand, one that had shattered everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the universe. As the warships from the alien coalition continued their slow, inexorable approach toward Earth, Lyra's mind raced to process the truth that had just been revealed to her. The child was not merely a survivor, not a lost relic of the Zener's shattered civilization. The child was something far darker. A living weapon, designed by the Zener themselves to either unite the galaxy or destroy it. Their ability to connect with the minds of alien species, to broadcast their presence across the stars, was not a gift, it was a power, one that could either save the galaxy or wipe out entire fleets with a single thought. Lyra's heart sank as the implications became clear. The child was the final piece in an ancient puzzle, one that could tip the balance of power in favor of whoever controlled them. And now, that control lay within her hands. But there was a catch. Using the child's abilities came at a steep cost: the complete erasure of their humanity. The very essence of the child would be sacrificed in the process. They would no longer be a child. they would become a force of destruction, a weapon devoid of all emotion, all identity. The child's soul would burn away, leaving only the remnants of a machine-like power. Lyra couldn't help but feel the weight of this revelation pressed down on her chest. She had grown to love this child, to see them not as a tool or a weapon, but as a fragile life that had been thrust into a war they never asked for. And now, she had to make an impossible choice. Would she allow this child, this innocent being, to become the very thing that could end the war? Or would she risk everything, her career, her life, the future of humanity, by protecting the child from becoming a mindless weapon? The decision weighed heavily on her, and the silence aboard the horizon was deafening. In her heart, she knew the stakes were higher than anything she had ever faced. But even in her darkest moments of doubt, she knew one thing: humanity's survival was no longer guaranteed. In fact, it was no longer clear whether they even deserved it. Her mind wandered back to the night she first found the child, frozen in cryostasis aboard the ancient Zener station. Back then, she had believed the child was simply an enigma, a mystery to unravel. But now, as she looked at the child so small, so vulnerable, she realized they were the center of a much larger cosmic game. A game played by forces far older than anything humanity could comprehend. The truth about the child's purpose had been hidden from her. Humanity, for all its self-righteous claims of being a force for good in the galaxy, was no innocent player in the events that had led up to this moment. Lyra had discovered, in fragments and whispers, that the Federation had not been a passive bystander in the Zener's fall. It had been complicit. There had been a faction within the UEFA, shadowy group of high-ranking officials who had manipulated events to prevent the Zener from uniting the galaxy. Their fear of the Zener's power, their desire to control the flow of information and technology, had led them to orchestrate the destruction of the Zener civilization. The child, the last heir to the Zener's broken empire, had been left to die on that station, forgotten and abandoned. But now, their role was clear. They were to either restore peace or bring about the destruction of all that humanity had built. Lyra stood at the center of a moral chasm, unable to escape the weight of her discovery. She had spent her life studying alien species, believing in the Federation's mission to explore and build peaceful alliances. But now she saw that mission for what it truly was: a means of controlling the galaxy, of asserting humanity's dominance over others. The UEF had used the child, just as they had used countless other species throughout history, as a pawn in their endless game of power. And now, Lyra was being asked to make a choice that could determine whether humanity would continue to play that game or whether it would be destroyed in the process. The child, meanwhile, was no longer the innocent, confused being they had once been. Their abilities were growing stronger every day, their telepathic connection to alien species becoming more pronounced. But with this power came something darker, a growing sense of doubt. The child began to question their own purpose, their identity. Were they truly human, or were they something else entirely? And if they were to be used as a weapon, what would remain of them once they had fulfilled their role? Lyra watched as the child struggled with these questions, their eyes filled with fear and confusion. They had been thrust into a world they didn't understand, caught between forces far beyond their comprehension. As Lyra struggled with her decision, a new development occurred. The alien warships, instead of launching a full-scale attack, offered a startling ultimatum. The child's return to them in exchange for peace. It was a proposal that seemed too simple, too straightforward, but beneath the surface, it was far more complex. The alien coalition was not offering peace to humanity. They were offering an end. The child was not meant to lead humanity to victory, as Lyra had hoped. They were meant to lead humanity to its extinction. The real warships, the true weapons, were waiting to reveal themselves. These ships, hidden deep within the galaxy, had been lying dormant for eons, waiting for the child to return to them. The child was the key to activating them, to unleashing a force that could wipe out all life in the galaxy. Humanity had been manipulated by forces older than the stars themselves, and now, as the warships loomed ever closer, Lyra realized the full extent of the disaster she had helped bring about. Lyra was faced with a choice she had never imagined. She could use the child's power to stop the war, to end the fighting and save millions of lives. But in doing so, she would lose the child completely. The child would no longer be a person. They would become a tool, a weapon devoid of emotion and humanity. Or she could defy the powers that be, protect the child, and risk everything: the lives of her crew, the future of Earth, and the survival of the human race. The weight of the decision was unbearable. And as the alien coalition's ultimatum loomed on the horizon, Lyra knew that the fate of the galaxy of all life was no longer in her hands. The real battle was about to begin, and no one, not even Lyra, could predict what the future would hold. The horizon hung in the cold silence of space, a ship now marked by the choices that had been made aboard it. Lyra stood before the child one last time, her heart heavy, torn between the agony of what was to come and the quiet understanding that there was no other way. The alien warships, once an undeniable threat, had now drawn closer to the final stages of their offensive, and the galaxy itself had been placed on the edge of an abyss. In the heart of the enemy fleet, a singular truth had become evident to Lyra: the child's power wasn't just about ending the war. It was about reshaping the very fabric of the galaxy itself. The child, now fully aware of their abilities, looked up at Lyra with something akin to acceptance. The fear that had once clouded their eyes was gone. They had grown, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. They knew what had to be done. They understood the consequences of their choice. With the power to end the war at their fingertips, the child made a decision that would define the end of the struggle. Lyra and the child had managed to infiltrate the heart of the alien coalition's fleet, a place where their enemy's power originated: an ancient, forgotten nexus of energy that linked the fleets, a device that had been dormant for eons. It was here that the child had realized the true extent of their power. Not just the ability to control minds or communicate telepathically, but the power to reach into the heart of the galaxy itself and disrupt the forces that governed its balance. With a deep breath, the child turned to Lyra one final time. Their voice was a whisper in her mind, calm and firm. "It's time." And with that, the child reached out, their mind extending toward the heart of the Nexus. Lyra's heart raced as the energy surged, vibrating through the horizon like a shockwave. But the moment the child's power connected with the Nexus, everything shifted. A wave of energy rolled outward, destabilizing the fleet's cohesion. The warships, once a well-coordinated force, began to break apart, their systems malfunctioning. But as the child's power began to tear apart the Nexus, a sudden, unexpected reaction occurred. Instead of collapsing the warships completely, the disruption sent a ripple across the galaxy. The power that had been controlled for so long unraveled, but it did not destroy the fleets outright. Instead, it shattered the balance of power. Factions within the coalition broke apart, alliances fractured, and the once unified threat turned into chaos. No side was left standing with the upper hand. The child's sacrifice had ended the war, but not in the way anyone had expected. It had not created peace. Instead, it had thrown the galaxy into a state of fragile, uncertain peace, one that was as volatile as it was unpredictable. Lyra watched, helpless, as the child's essence flickered. They had done it. They had destroyed the heart of the enemy's power, but in the process, they had given up their own life. The child's body collapsed in on itself, the very energy they had used to destabilize the warships now consuming them. It was as though their existence had been tied to the very power they had destroyed. In that moment, the child became something else, no longer the innocent being Lyra had once known, but a force that had reshaped the galaxy. And then, with a final pulse of energy, they were gone. Lyra's hands trembled as she stared at the space where the child had been. A deep silence filled the room. She had succeeded in her mission, but at what cost? The child was gone, their sacrifice changing everything. The galaxy had been spared from annihilation, but it was now left in a state of flux, unsure of what would come next. When Lyra returned to Earth, she was not the same person who had left. The Federation was in disarray, shattered by the events that had unfolded. Factions within the UEF, once united in their goal of controlling the galaxy, now vied for power. Some believed the child's sacrifice had been the beginning of a new era, one that would allow humanity to become something more. Others saw it as a tragic end, the loss of hope that had come too late to prevent the chaos that was now unfolding. As Lyra walked through the corridors of the Federation's headquarters, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the decisions that had been made. The child's legacy was one of sacrifice, but also one of uncertainty. The galaxy was now left to pick up the pieces, and humanity, no longer the clear victor, was left to reckon with its place in the grand scheme of things. The Federation no longer had the power it once held. The child's sacrifice had leveled the playing field. Now, humanity stood among the stars as an equal, a species caught in the eternal struggle for survival. It was no longer about domination. It was about survival, alliances, and the unknown forces that would rise in the future. The child's legacy, once a symbol of hope, was now a reminder of the fragility of peace and the danger of unchecked power. And as the galactic leaders began to assemble, trying to rebuild their fractured alliances, Lyra stood at the edge of the unknown. What would humanity's future be? Were they meant to continue down the path of destruction, as every civilization before them had? Or was this the beginning of something greater, something that humanity itself could never have imagined? The final twist came as Lyra sat in the quiet aftermath of the child's sacrifice. In the deepest archives of the UEF, a long-forgotten piece of history resurfaced an ancient text, one that spoke of a cycle, the cycle of destruction and rebirth. A cycle that all civilizations, including humanity, were bound to repeat. It was a chilling realization. The war, the destruction, the child's sacrifice, they were all part of something much larger. And in the end, Lyra knew that humanity's true place in the galaxy was not that of conquerors or saviors. They were simply players in a much older game, one that was bound to repeat itself, again and again, until the very fabric of the galaxy was irrevocably altered. The question remained, was humanity ever meant to be a force for peace, or was it doomed to fall into the same destructive patterns as every civilization before it? Lyra didn't have the answer. But she knew that whatever came next, it would not be an easy path. And perhaps that was the true legacy of the child, showing humanity not the way forward, but the way back. The way back to the beginning of the cycle,